MacBook Air has seen some incredible changes. It actually went from being one of Apple's most expensive notebooks at $1,800 in 2008 to being the most affordable at $1,000 today. But none of that happened without a little criticism and controversy along the way. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the history of Apple's most popular notebook, the MacBook Air. This is Greg with Apple Explained, and I want to thank MacPaw for sponsoring this video. If you want to help decide which topics I cover, make sure you're subscribed, and voting polls like this one will appear in your mobile activity feed. So the MacBook Air debuted in 2008 when Apple decided to compete in a new category of notebooks called ultra portables. There were already many PCs in this space, but Apple thought they could do it better with the Air. In fact, Steve Jobs outlined the industry averages for ultra portables at the time, with most weighing in at 3 pounds, achieving a thinness of about 0.8 inches, featuring 11 or 12-inch displays, compact miniature keyboards, and underpowered processors. He admitted a 3-pound notebook would be a good target, considering the 2008 MacBook was 5 pounds, but he didn't want to make compromises to achieve that goal. He wanted Apple to create an ultra-portable that was even thinner, with a full-size display and full-size keyboard, and a powerful processor. And that's exactly what they accomplished with the Air. And it's why the product was so disruptive. It featured a level of thinness that was genuinely shocking. Just listen to the audience's reaction to seeing it for the first time. The original MacBook Air was just 0.16 inches at its thinnest point, which was not only dramatically thinner than any other ultra-portable, but almost 90% thinner than Apple's other MacBook models. It was a dream designed for travelers and business people who carried around their notebooks often and used them on flights. But the Air's radical new design did require a few compromises. First, it didn't have a CD drive, which some people went crazy over. I remember people saying, why would anyone buy a computer that can't burn CDs, play DVDs, or even install software from disks? That's crazy. And while that may have been a deal breaker for a few people, Apple tried their best at remedying those issues. For example, they created a software solution called Remote Disk, where a Mac with a disk drive could share it with the Air, allowing it to install software from a disk over a wireless network. But of course, this required the user to have access to another Mac. Second, Apple introduced a hardware solution with their external USB SuperDrive, which retailed for $80 and continues to be sold today. With this accessory, users could simply plug in the SuperDrive when they needed it and left it behind when they didn't. But the lack of a disk drive wasn't the only compromise. The Air also featured an 80GB hard drive, which was painfully small even back then, considering the 2008 MacBook offered 120GB and the MacBook Pro offered 200. I actually remember tech reviewers back then complaining about how difficult it was to transition from their MacBook Pro to the Air, since they had to pick and choose which files they'd include on the smaller hard drive and which they'd leave behind. And this is an issue Mac users still have today, which is why I recommend using Clean My Mac X to clear out old clutter and prepare it for new macOS releases like Big Sur coming this fall. Macs do accumulate junk files that you may have only needed temporarily, but permanently take up space. That's why I run a smart scan on my MacBook Pro every week, which removes about 10 gigabytes of clutter every time. It also helps you view and manage application permissions, scans your system to identify and remove any malware, and gives you an overview of what files and applications are taking up the most space, so you can easily remove large files you don't need. You can try out Clean My Mac X for free using the link in the description, and if you like the product, the upgrade is only $35 annually. Now, you might be thinking, why didn't customers just upgrade to a larger hard drive on the original MacBook Air if they needed more space? And it's because there was only one upgrade option, which got you even less space, 64GB instead of 80. And while it doesn't make sense that you'd pay more for less space, it all came down to performance. The included 80GB hard drive was much slower and more fragile than the 64GB solid-state drive. But SSD technology at the time was still in its early stages, and therefore came at a premium. Upgrading the Air to that 64GB SSD cost an extra $1,300. And yes, that's on top of the notebook's $1,800 base price, totaling $3,100. And that's something else that many people today may not realize. The MacBook Air wasn't Apple's low-cost notebook like it is today. In fact, at $1,800, it was closer in price to the $2,000 MacBook Pro than the $1,100 MacBook. So for many people, the MacBook Air appeared to be a terrible value, because based on specs alone, you were paying more for less. Compared to the MacBook, which was $700 cheaper, you were getting less power, less storage, less ports, and no disk drive. But as I always say, products are more than a box of specs. You have to consider the experience they deliver. And the MacBook Air delivered an experience that no other notebook could. It was super light, super thin, super portable, and with the optional SSD, super fast and durable. And because of those strengths, many people had no problem with its $1,800 price. But controversy surrounding the Air went deeper than this, because Apple didn't just release the MacBook Air as a side project or a hobby, or to satisfy a few travelers who wanted a super portable notebook. They referred to it as the future of Apple notebooks, which made a lot of people uncomfortable, because many users liked their huge hard drives, wide array of ports, and integrated disk drives. They just couldn't imagine living without those things. But the original MacBook Air really was a sign of things to come, because since then, every Apple notebook has lost their disk drive, adopted solid-state drives, and become thinner and lighter. But what's even more incredible is how the MacBook Air has changed. Its first refresh came in mid-2009 and addressed some of the original model's limitations, like more processing power in the base model, 128GB of hard drive storage, better graphics performance, and a lower base price of $1,500. But the bigger second-generation update came in 2010 and helped position the MacBook Air to become Apple's best-selling notebook. These models ditched the awkward I/O port door in favor of an open design, and included an additional USB port, stereo speakers, improved battery life, and a higher resolution display. It also featured a 128GB solid-state drive in the base model, which was a big deal, plus an even lower starting price at $1,300. But something no one expected was the addition of an 11-inch model, which sold for just $1,000, making it one of the most affordable Apple notebooks ever. And that's exactly why, in 2011, the MacBook Air became Apple's best-selling notebook. But this was only the beginning. For the next 6 years, Apple continued to refresh both MacBook Air models with updated processors, more memory, and even reduced their pricing every year until 2014, when their costs settled at $1,000 for the 13-inch model and just $900 for the 11-inch. So in just 6 years, the MacBook Air went from being a premium notebook that many considered a ripoff to becoming the most affordable and best-selling Apple notebook ever. Now, unfortunately, all the Air's price reductions it received over the years caught up with it in 2018, when Apple decided to raise its price for the first time ever by $200. Plus, they eliminated the more affordable 11-inch model, which meant the price of Apple's cheapest notebook went from $900 with the 11-inch Air to $1,200 with the new 13-inch model, something many people voiced frustration over. But at least the MacBook Air's price hike was accompanied by a big upgrade. It received a new design for the first time in 8 years, which was even thinner and lighter than before, along with a Retina display, Touch ID, and 2 USB-C ports. There was another refresh in 2019 where Apple added a True Tone display and butterfly keyboard and dropped the price by $100 to $1,100. Its price dropped again in March of this year to $1,000, and Apple switched out the butterfly keyboard, which was experiencing durability issues, to what they call a magic keyboard, which uses traditional scissor mechanisms for each key, since they're not only more durable but provide more travel. So as it stands today, the MacBook Air is Apple's most affordable notebook, and in my opinion, the best value MacBook ever, which would probably shock some people if you told them that back in 2008. And if you are planning on buying one, I highly recommend upgrading its processor from the standard dual-core i3 to the quad-core i5. It'll make the machine twice as powerful, increase its longevity, and it's only $100